Back once. Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. This is Sharon Kyle sitting here with my life partner, husband, co-founder of the LA Progressive, Dick Price. And we're having a conversation with Peter Larman. Peter is a retired minister who formerly led Progressive Christians Uniting in Los Angeles and is a member of the National Council of Elders. Peter serves on the National Council of Elders King and Breaking Silence team, and he has contributed a magnificent piece to the LA Progressive. I encourage you to read it. It's titled Enlightenments, Absent Engaged Hearts, Brilliance, and Barbarism Can Happily Cohabitate. Wow, that's a mouthful, Peter. Thank you. Welcome.
It is a mouthful. It's good to see you. We're recording this on World AIDS Day, not being marked by our current administration, which is of a piece with everything they do. Also, this is the 70th anniversary, I think, of Rosa Parks' bold action in Montgomery, Alabama, that signaled a human rights revolution. And we're talking really about human rights revolutions today. Yeah, I wrote this thing, and you teased me a little bit, and appropriately so, about going heavy on the history. But I just can't get over what I see as a parallel between some of the allegedly brightest people in the world today and the very bright people of the 18th century, enlightened people, who readily responded to the call of reason and said they were, outgrowing superstition and so forth, who were barbaric in their behavior in relation to slavery and the business of slavery, which was a gigantic transatlantic business in the 18th century. So that's kind of the point of view. And I want to say that when I talk about brilliant people, yeah, a kind of left brain brilliance, capacity to get stuff done. But that old expression, people who know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. That's really what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, a key part of that, I think we oftentimes uh, try to figure out what was going on with our fathers of our country, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson wrote wonderful ideas about freedom and liberty and democracy, and had a plantation full of slaves and impregnated at least one of them numerous times. So what was going on in their head? And there was one phrase you cited from Jonathan Edwards about they viewed slavery as a natural order of things. And that resonates with today, is how does our wealthiest class, how does Jeff Bezos have spent $250 million on a boat to go sailing around the Mediterranean and then work his people in warehouses half to death? I mean, it's the same kind of disconnection. It's because they see themselves as something special and different than the rest of people.
Yes, we've talked about it before, but I don't think we can talk about it enough because it's deeply troubling. I mean, there's a report about major corporations that in effect rely on SNAP. So here we have an administration that's talking about SNAP abuse, and they're going to cut out the possibility that people would get some food that they might not actually need. Whereas actually the SNAP abusers, the Supplemental Nutrition Program, are these companies that don't pay their people enough. And Amazon is way high on that list in terms of the percentage of its people who use the benefits. I even learned that shockingly, the Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the world's greatest hospital systems, about a fifth of its employees don't have enough to eat and need to rely on SNAP. So yeah, there's something missing there. There is something missing when the moral imagination, which is just understanding that we're all in this short life of ours, we're all on this earth together. Yeah, it's a kind of deformity, and And the list of people who behave in that fashion grows daily, apparently.
Absolutely.
The Nietzschean people, the people who think, oh, well, I'm an Übermensch, I'm an Übermensch, not accountable to anybody. You can kind of see when you look in their faces that they're lacking love. They're lacking love. I mean, love for others, but they may be themselves unloved, damaged in some way.
Mm-hmm,
But the way we've organized our society, we're not in it together. I mean, Trump is an example. He spends all his time on his Mar-a-Lago and his golf courses and the White House and his big plane, and then makes decisions about lots of people he has nothing to do with. I don't believe he did ever drove through Harlem. And so
Hell no, hell no.
so that it's like that's a different world, and that's like darkest Africa, and we don't know anything about. So I don't think the wealthy in our world really do see themselves as part of any together.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about SNAP and the oligarchs that create the conditions that increase the need for SNAP. And it appears that the oligarchs don't see that they have any accountability or responsibility for creating the social and political determinants that where we have a country now where the middle class has been completely hollowed out. So I want you bring up a topic in your piece and you talk about soul force. And while I was reading it, I had heard of soul force, but I couldn't remember. And then I looked in the LA Progressive glossary, which everyone who's listening, LA Progressive has a glossary in the menu. I looked at the glossary to see if soul force was there, and I think it wasn't there. And I forgot to add it. I've got to add it. But talk to us about soul force, Peter.
Well, I was a latecomer to understanding this term, but it's extremely important in movement circles. In thinking actually about Rosa Parks and Montgomery, um, the late wonderful Reverend James Lawson from there in Los Angeles, long time minister of the Holman Memorial United Methodist Church, but before that time, an advisor to Dr. King. He was actually the first of the civil rights people to go to India and to confer with Gandhi. And he brought back this idea of I have to say it right, but it's a Vedic word, Satyagriha, soul force, which Gandhi had used in his salt marsh campaign against the British in the push for Indian independence. Just refusing to submit passively, passive resistance, but courageous passive resistance to oppression. So King sought out James Lawson when Lawson came back and wanted to know what's this about. And then obviously King made it a huge part of the DNA, you might say, of the nonviolent movement. And it's been erupting everywhere, always successfully when it's applied in the right way. In South Africa, the Polish Solidarity Movement, elsewhere. We say, I mean, I'm a revivalist. I say that I think we could be at the cusp of a rediscovery of this here because people need that community of spirit and that community of conscience and that community of struggle. And they surely don't need to be simply cogs in this soulless machine that the new economy is becoming. I think I say in this essay that people now are told by the so-called masters of the universe, you need to get on the bullet train. If you're enlightened, you need to, compute.
Right.
And a lot of people now are saying, no. And in the Bay Area, in the sort of heart of where all this stuff began, in particular, there seems to be a strong rejection on the part of many, many younger people. No, we're not going to do that. Right? Or if we do it, we're going to do it on our terms, not for you guys. Right? We're going to use our technology, our technological capacity for human flourishing and not for your profits. I hope there's a turning. I mean, I keep thinking there's a turning. People talk about third Reconstruction. God knows we're due for one, and it has to be more sweeping than the second Reconstruction of the 1960s. As great and noble as that was, we see now, you know, we spoke about this last time. We see now we're on the cusp of losing even the most fundamental things, the right to vote.
Yes, that's right.
Habeas corpus, habeas corpus. I mean, did you read the Sarah Stillman article about the third country deportations? It's in the New Yorker. I don't think, I'm used to reading shocking things. I don't think I read anything quite as hair-raising as that in a long, long time. Sarah Stillman is widely respected because she has her own sources, and they call her, from these prisons in African countries, remote places, and people keep getting moved. So if they have family and legal representation, they can't be found because this government, our government, is paying countries like Chad, X millions of dollars, take 150 people or just dump them. People have no connection to Chad in conditions that are horrendous, unsanitary, torture, all that kind of stuff. Will these people ever get justice? Not unless we fail to. They won't get justice if we fail to say this is happening. We're not going to pretend it's not happening, and it's our tax dollars that are doing it.
Right. And I'm glad that Sarah Stillman got that published in the New Yorker, because that tells me something about the acceptance of this truth. I mean, that's a mainstream magazine.
Yes, it does reach millions of people. Possibly you're experiencing the whiplash I'm experiencing now as an alleged head of state in Venezuela is charged with being the head of a drug cartel to justify his decapitation, whereas this country is supporting the election of a convicted head of a drug cartel in nearby Honduras. If you can't feel the whiplash there, and this gets reported without irony, as just one more thing, but it's so distorted and it's so inhuman. Let's get back to that. It is so inhuman that I think there's a limit to how much people can, in fact, stomach. And it doesn't have to be what is that 3% rule? It doesn't have to be 30% of the population rising up and saying enough. 3%, and that goes back to the power of the radical nonviolence.
Right, right. Well, when you talk about the philosophers and the artists and the political leaders, some of them brilliant, at the same time, being right in step with barbarism, it makes me think of cognitive dissonance. I can't imagine that these brilliant people didn't have a sense of how brutal this treatment was. And what they probably had to do was convince themselves that either these people deserved it or that it wasn't going on. And maybe that's my naivete. And perhaps it's just difficult for me to believe that someone with this kind of intelligence, philosophical bent, would not stand up and say enough is enough.
Well, anti-black. Go ahead.
That goes to the earlier point that the excuse they used for themselves was that this is the natural order of the things. This is, and they would back themselves up.
That's not enough for a smart person. A smart person.
Well, it evidently it was, because they were smart people and they were slaveholders. So they managed to bridge that divide, and they didn't kill themselves, and they didn't stop the slavery. So somehow they thought they arranged their religion and their thinking and their society to believe that this was just fine.
What were you going to say, Peter?
I was going to say that anti-black racism grew along with the growth of a slavery-based economy, an economy specifically based on transporting people by the millions to New World colonies to solve a labor shortage. Now, slavery had existed in Europe, but you know this, the word slave comes from Slav. There had been slavery that was not specifically racialized slavery, but this slavery, and I make a point of saying it got far worse when the English speakers jumped in and began to supplant the trade that the Iberians, the Portuguese, and the Spanish, but especially the Portuguese had run. The Portuguese were undoubtedly racist and in an anti-Black sense, but not like that. Their ships, for example, their Middle Passage ships didn't have these barracoons, these cages on the decks.
Right.
And the idea that you could have nothing to do with people in slavery, that is to say, no contact, you could never make a legitimate family, or that enslaved people could not buy their way out. There's a word for that in Portuguese, and I forget the word, the locondo system. When the English came into it, and these are proud Protestants, and they're like the most enlightened people in the world. They're like, oh no, this is strictly a business. This is a commodity. This is a commodity. The market price will be set based on what sugar is selling for. Just plain and simple, right? There's a direct correlation between Caribbean sugar prices and the price of a human being on the coast of Africa. And the fact that people would die on board in great numbers, so what? We have insurance for that. This is the shocking thing about that 1781. There's a new book, the Zorg, where all those people were tossed overboard shamelessly.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in the Dutch language, the word Zorg means concern or care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about that in this piece.
I do. I say I get into the weeds a little bit, and then I say, and this is the good news. Nobody has explained why in the 1780s and 90s, beginning with a fairly small number of people, and they were mostly, fairly prominent people in London who knew each other. Their little association was called the Clapham Sect. They began organizing, and their organizing was unbelievably successful in the course of a few short years. They said, wait a minute, this is completely abhorrent. This is completely abhorrent. Their propaganda, and it was propaganda, they used leaflets, they used, newspaper ads and stuff, was, we're talking about human beings. They went directly to the fact that the people whose lives are being uprooted and destroyed really by this system are human beings just like us. And they had the support of some people who had been formerly enslaved who stood with them and told their own story, like Equiano. And the working class, which didn't give two damns about this system until this point, joined them. Otherwise, they couldn't have got this stuff through Parliament. They could not have abolished the slave trade within the empire in 1807, let alone abolish slavery itself within the empire in 1833. And I'm at pains to say, not nearly enough. The anti-Blackness persisted, but still, what a breakthrough. What a breakthrough. Somehow these people had human hearts, not just, Cambridge and Oxford smarts. And they put to shame the people who didn't step up before them. I'm always interested in the counterexample. So I mentioned the number of religious people, Jonathan Edwards being one, who thought of this as the natural order. But they knew that John Wesley, who was their contemporary, took a very strong principled stand against slavery, and they just ignored it.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of like
They made him an outlier.
Like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, who both happened to die on the same day, July 4th, 50 years after the Revolution or the War of Independence. I'm starting to not call it a revolution anymore because it wasn't.
Good, because we need to work on that. It was a a dispute among white property owners.
That's right.
Right. And it was far from the idea that the colonies should separate from the mother country was not by any means universally popular in the colonies. Tons of people were opposed, but they were then, they were either made to join or they were thrown out.
Yeah, so where I was thinking, there's a bit of a connection, a much smaller connection in this public abhorrence for what they're seeing back in England then, and a little bit of what we're seeing now with the reaction to thugs beating up immigrants on the streets of our cities. The country is turning, a significant part of the country is turning against that. Now, I don't know how far that'll go, but you do. So it isn't so surprising to me that John Wesley and others would take a look at what slavery actually was. And if they didn't have an economic stake in it, they'd say, well, this is horrible. These are people. They're dark-skinned people, but they're clearly people. And we're doing these horrible things, working them to death before they're 30. It's not surprising that at least some would have the courage of their convictions to stand up against the power in their society.
Yes. And occasionally, everybody knows the story, I think, now of John Newton, who was a slave ship captain, who renounced it. So my idea is that lights can come on in people's minds. I think maybe Dick, right now, I'm again hoping this is the case. People understand that that despite what he says, Hegseth did give the order to kill the survivors of the first strike, just to murder them, which is clearly a war crime. They're going to try to shrug this off, but that's catching hold in people's imaginations. I mean, you said in an earlier conversation, everybody can see that these are fishing boats. These are not high sophisticated drug transport vehicles. So we're getting to that limit. I think I heard that Trump's approval now has plunged below 35%, lower than ever before. Plus, people can see his mental decay. So things are starting to percolate a little bit on the side of humanity.
That's right. Well, the piece that you wrote, it's Enlightenments, absent engaged hearts, brilliance and barbarism can happily cohabit. Thank you, Peter Larman, for again. This is really an important piece because one of the things that you do here is that you name many historical figures, and it gives people an opportunity to dig deeper if you want to do your own research. And again, if you like what you're hearing here on the LA Progressive, please like and share.
Absolutely. Hear that, everybody? Like it and share it. And by all means, check out Sharon Kyle's writing in LA Progressive, because it is a gift to all of us.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
It's a pleasure. Take care.
All right. Bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.